Oh, Miles wants to try a difficult math problem. How cute.
The whole class heard.
Honey, this problem is harder than even students twice your level. And honestly, your level is low, isn't it?
She pushed the paper across his desk, face down, like a challenge she knew he'd lose.
This is impossible, Miles. Especially for someone like you. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You could sweep the floor without differential calculus.
Miles picked up the paper, unfazed, whispering,
I'll submit it tomorrow. Miss Whitfield.
She smiled at the class.
At least he's brave.
She called it an impossible problem, but he solved it. She gave him 58 points. Incorrect grading. But this is what she didn't know. He hadn't just solved her impossible problem. He even found a hidden error in her answer. So who actually failed the test? Lincoln Park Academy, North Side, Chicago. One of the most elite public magnet schools in the state. Acceptance rate? 12%. The hallways gleam. The trophy cases overflow. The banners say, Excellence through Diversity. The brochure looks like a dream. But the AP Calculus Honors section tells a different story. 22 students, 3 of them black. And one of those 3 is Miles Grant. Now let me tell you about Miles, because you need to understand who this kid is before we go any further. Miles lives with his grandmother, Estelle, in a small apartment on the west side of Chicago. No car, 2 buses to get to school. Takes him over an hour each way. Estelle works 2 jobs, morning shift at a laundromat, night shift ironing clothes for a dry cleaner. She raised Miles since he was 4. No parents in the picture, just her, just him. Just enough to get by. Miles studies at the public library on West Division Street, not at home. The apartment is too loud, neighbors arguing through thin walls, traffic outside the window, a leaking radiator that clanks every 40 seconds. You can't think in that place. So every night after school, Miles rides the bus to the library and stays until they lock the doors. He carries a battered composition notebook everywhere he goes. Black cover, worn edges, pages falling out. But what's inside that notebook? That's the thing. It's not homework. It's not class notes. It's his own world. Proofs he writes for fun. Number patterns he discovers at 2 in the morning. Theorems pulled from library textbooks 3 levels above his grade. Miles doesn't study calculus because someone told him to. He studies it because his brain won't stop. But here's what breaks my heart. He doesn't raise his hand in class. Not anymore. Last year, sophomore year, he raised his hand to answer a question. Whitfield paused, looked at him over her glasses, and said, in front of the whole room, "Let's hear from someone who's been following the chapter." He had been following the chapter. He was 2 chapters ahead. He never raised his hand again. Now let me tell you about Constance Whitfield, because she's not a cartoon villain. That would make this story easier, but it wouldn't make it true. Whitfield is good at her job. Her students pass the AP exam at a 92% rate. She's won Teacher of the Year twice. She has a master's degree from Northwestern, framed on the wall behind her desk. She runs a tight ship. Parents love her. The principal trusts her. She's been at Lincoln Park for 24 years. She believes in standards, truly believes. The problem isn't her standards. The problem is who she believes can meet them. She never uses slurs. She never raises her voice. She does something worse. She uses the seating chart. Miles sits in the back corner. She uses the cold call. She skips his name every time. She uses grading. His partial credit is always lower than Tommy Sullivan's for the same kind of work. Tommy Sullivan, white kid, front row, top of the class, gets every benefit of the doubt that Miles never gets. Not because Tommy is a bad kid, he's decent, but the system treats him like he belongs, and it treats Miles like a guest who overstayed his welcome. Whitfield's prejudice doesn't live in her words. It lives in the spaces between policy, in the patterns, in the silence, invisible to anyone who isn't its target. Now here's where the stakes come in. The District Math Showcase is in 18 days, a public competition, held right there in the school auditorium. Parents in the audience, board members in the front row, university professors on the judging panel, a local news crew covering it for the district website. The top performer gets a scholarship recommendation and district-wide recognition. It's the biggest stage a math student at Lincoln Park can stand on. And here's the rule. Whitfield picks which students represent her class. She has never picked Miles. Not once, not ever. But that bulletin board in the hallway, the one with the sign-up sheet for the showcase, Miles walks past it every single day. He reads every name on the list. His hand reaches for the pen. And every day, he pulls it back. Not because he can't do the math, but because he's been told, in 100 quiet ways, that the math isn't for him. But something is about to change. Because that test she marked 58, Miles didn't throw it away this time. He kept it. And he started comparing his answers to hers. What he found, it's going to shake that school to its foundation. 2 days later, Whitfield made an announcement that changed everything. She stood at the front of the class, hands clasped, professional smile, the kind of smile that looks warm but means business.
I have exciting news. The District Math Showcase is coming up, and this year I'm opening a qualifying challenge. Anyone who wants to represent our class, anyone at all, may attempt it.
She said anyone. Her eyes swept the room. They landed on Tommy Sullivan, on Rebecca Moore, on Jason Ellis. They skipped Miles, like he wasn't even there. Nina Dawson, Miles's best friend, 2 rows over, leaned across the aisle and whispered, "She said anyone. That includes you." Miles hesitated. His hand hovered over his desk. He could feel Whitfield watching, waiting, expecting him to sit still like he always does. He took a problem sheet. Something flickered across Whitfield's face. Not anger. Something worse. Satisfaction. Like she was thinking, good. Now he'll finally see for himself where he stands. Now this problem set, it wasn't regular classwork. This was a filter, designed to separate the students Whitfield wanted from the ones she didn't. A multivariable optimization problem. A proof involving convergence. And the big one, a composite function that required careful application of the chain rule across 3 nested layers. One wrong step, and the whole thing falls apart. This was harder than anything in the AP curriculum. Way harder. And Whitfield knew exactly what she was doing. That night, Miles sat in the public library on West Division Street until the lights flickered at closing time. He worked through every problem, methodical, patient, no shortcuts. Not yet. He filled 6 pages in his composition notebook, clean handwriting, every step shown. When he got to the chain rule problem, the composite function, he solved it with extra care. He differentiated every layer, including the innermost function, the one most students skip, the one most students forget. He didn't forget. He turned it in the next morning, placed it on Whitfield's desk. She took it without looking up, without a word. 2 days passed. Grades came back. Tommy Sullivan, 94. Rebecca Moore, 89. 3 others in the 80s. Miles Grant, 58. Same number as before. Same red ink. Same note at the bottom. Show your work next time. He showed his work. Every line, every step, every single thing she asked for. But this time, Miles didn't put the paper in his bag. He didn't swallow the anger. He didn't go quiet. He opened his composition notebook to the page where he solved the same problem. Then he pulled up the answer key Whitfield posted on the class website. He compared them, side by side, line by line. His answer was different from the key, but his answer was right. He checked it again. Different method, same result. He checked it a third time. Same result again. His hands were shaking. Not from doubt, from certainty. The answer key, the one Whitfield wrote herself, the one she graded him against, the one she treated as gospel, had an error. A real one. She treated a negative exponent as positive in the innermost function. A tiny sign flip. One small mistake. But in the chain rule, small mistakes don't stay small. They cascade. They change everything. Miles closed his notebook. He sat in the library alone. The lights flickered again. And for the first time in his life, Miles Grant decided not to stay quiet. But here's the problem. When you're 16, black, and sitting in the back corner, how do you tell the most respected teacher in the school that she's wrong? The next afternoon, Miles waited until every student left room 212. He stood by the door, composition notebook in one hand, graded test in the other. His heart was pounding, but his face gave nothing away. He walked to Whitfield's desk. "Mrs. Whitfield, I'd like to discuss my grade on the qualifying set." She didn't look up. She was organizing papers, stacking them into a neat pile, taking her time, like he wasn't even standing there. "Office hours are Thursday, Miles. I believe there's an error in the answer key." Now she looked up. She set the papers down, removed her reading glasses, folded them slowly, and stared at him like he'd just told her the sky was green. "Excuse me?" "The answer key, for problem 4, the composite function. I think there's a sign error in the chain rule." She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. "Miles, I've been teaching this course for 24 years. I wrote this problem myself, with my own hands. I checked it with my own eyes." She paused. Let the silence do its work. "If your answer doesn't match the key, I suggest you review the fundamentals. Start with Chapter 3. Work your way up. And maybe, once you actually understand the basics, you'll stop challenging things you don't fully grasp." She picked up her glasses, put them back on, went back to her papers. Conversation over. She didn't check his work. She didn't pull out a calculator. She didn't even glance at his notebook. She used her authority, 24 years, a master's degree, 2 Teacher of the Year awards, as proof that she could not be wrong. But Miles didn't leave. "Could you just look at it? I can show you where the answers diverge." Whitfield sighed, the kind of sigh that says, "I'm doing you a favor by even listening." "Fine, show me." Miles opened his notebook, placed it next to the answer key on her desk, side by side. He pointed to line 4. "Now, let me explain this in a way that makes sense, because you don't need a math degree to understand what happened. Think of it like giving directions. You need to make 3 turns to get home. Whitfield's directions say, turn right, turn left. Miles's directions say, turn right, turn right, turn right. If you follow Whitfield's directions, you end up lost. If you follow Miles's directions, you get home. That's what happened with the math. The chain rule says, when you have a function inside a function inside a function, you have to take the derivative of every single layer. Outside first, then middle, then the innermost one. Whitfield did the outside layer correctly. She did the middle layer correctly. But on the innermost function, the one buried deepest, she treated a negative exponent as positive. She flipped a sign, one tiny flip. And because of that, her entire final answer was wrong. Miles didn't flip the sign. Miles got it right. He showed her, right there on the desk. 2 solutions, 2 different answers, one of them correct, one of them not. Whitfield studied it for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds. That's how long she gave it. Then she closed his notebook and pushed it back toward him. I appreciate your enthusiasm, Miles, but I didn't get a master's degree from Northwestern to be corrected by a 16-year-old who can barely keep up with the syllabus. The answer key is correct. Review your fundamentals. She turned her back, started erasing the whiteboard. He stood there for another 3 seconds. Then he picked up his notebook and walked out. That night, Miles went to the library. He sat at his usual table, and he did something he had never done before. He solved the problem again, from scratch, using a completely different method. Got the same answer. Then he solved it a 3rd time. Another method. Same answer again. 3 methods, 3 attempts, 1 answer. His answer, not hers. He photographed his work with his phone. The screen was cracked. The camera barely focused, but the numbers were legible. Every single one. Then he opened his school email and typed a message he never thought he'd write. To Mr. Russell Adams, Mathematics Department Chair. Subject: Possible discrepancy in AP Calculus Qualifying Exam answer key. His finger hovered over send for a full minute. He pressed it. Adams agreed to meet the next day. After school. His office. Just the 2 of them. Adams reviewed Miles's work in silence. 15 minutes. Not a word. He'd look at Miles's notebook, then at the answer key on his screen, then back at the notebook. Then he pulled out a legal pad and re-derived the problem himself, from scratch, step by step. He looked up at Miles. You're right. There's a sign error in the key. Miles exhaled. For the first time in days, something released inside his chest. Not celebration, not victory, just relief. The quiet relief of someone who's been screaming into silence and finally, someone heard. Adams told Miles he'd raise it with Whitfield. He'd handle it, professionally, discreetly. And he did. He talked to Whitfield, behind closed doors. Whitfield's response? She acknowledged she'd review the formatting. Formatting. That's what she called it. A conceptual error became a formatting issue. A fundamental mistake became a typo. She didn't change Miles's grade. She didn't add him to the showcase roster. She didn't correct the answer key for the class. Nothing changed. Miles proved he was right. A department chair confirmed it. And still, nothing. Because being right isn't enough when the person who's wrong holds the gradebook. Being right isn't enough when the system protects the title and ignores the truth. So now Miles had proof. He had confirmation. He had the math on his side. But he had no power. And without power, what do you do with proof? You wait. You watch. And if you're Miles Grant, you keep that notebook close. Because something tells me he's going to need it again. The question is, when the moment comes, will anyone be watching? Sometimes the right person shows up at exactly the right time. Not by accident, by design. You just don't know it yet. Dr. Harold Simmons walked into room 212 on a Tuesday morning, 68 years old. Retired mathematics professor from the University of Chicago, now serving on the district's academic review board. He was there for a routine classroom observation, standard procedure, nothing unusual. At least, that's what everyone thought. Simmons sat in the back row, gray suit, reading glasses on a chain around his neck, a small leather notebook open on his knee. He didn't introduce himself to the students. He just watched. Whitfield was in her element, confident, precise. She worked through an improper integral on the whiteboard. Her marker squeaked with each stroke. The class took notes. Tommy Sullivan nodded along in the front row. Everything looked perfect. except it wasn't. From his corner seat, Miles saw it. The moment Whitfield evaluated the limit at the boundary, something was off. She assumed the function was continuous at that point. She didn't check. She just moved forward, like the math would take care of itself. But the function wasn't continuous there. There was a discontinuity. And if the function isn't continuous, the integral doesn't converge the way she set it up. Miles didn't raise his hand. He learned that lesson a long time ago. He just wrote it down in his notebook, quietly, head down. But Nina saw him writing. And Nina, God bless Nina, doesn't know how to be quiet. You caught something, didn't you? She said it loud enough. The whole class turned. Whitfield turned. And Dr. Simmons, in the back row, looked up from his leather notebook. Every eye in the room landed on Miles. He was trapped. And he knew it. He spoke carefully, slowly, like a man walking across thin ice. I think the function might not be continuous at that boundary. If it's not, the integral doesn't converge the way it's set up. The room went still. Whitfield's jaw tightened. Her knuckles whitened around the marker. Thank you, Miles. I'll remind you that we simplify assumptions in this course for pedagogical clarity. Not everything requires a footnote. She turned back to the board. Case closed. In her mind, at least. But in the second row, Tommy Sullivan picked up his graphing calculator, punched in the function, looked at the screen, looked at Miles. He didn't say a word, but his face said everything. Miles was right. Again. And in the back row, Dr. Harold Simmons wrote something in his leather notebook. Then he underlined it. After class, the hallway was clearing out. Students shuffled toward their next period. Miles had his head down, walking fast, trying to disappear the way he always did. Young man. He stopped, turned around. Simmons was leaning against the wall, arms folded, studying Miles the way a jeweler studies a stone. That was a good catch. Boundary conditions trip up most graduate students. Where did you learn to think like that? Miles shrugged. The library. Simmons reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a business card. Plain white, black text. Just a name and a phone number. If you need anything before the showcase, call this number. Miles took the card, looked at it, looked at Simmons. He didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that felt honest. Thank you, sir. Simmons nodded once, then he walked away. 3 days later, Whitfield posted the official showcase roster on the bulletin board outside room 212. Tommy Sullivan, Rebecca Moore, Jason Ellis, Catherine Walsh. 4 names, 4 students. Miles Grant was not on the list. Nina saw the roster before Miles did. She was furious, pacing the hallway, hands balled into fists. This is garbage, Miles. You scored the same as half these people. You're better than most of them. She left you off because she wants to. Miles stared at the list. He wasn't surprised. That's the saddest part. He expected it. But someone else didn't. That evening, Dr. Harold Simmons made a phone call to Principal Diane Caldwell. It was short, polite, professional, and absolutely firm. He requested the roster be expanded to 5 participants. He cited Academic Review Board prerogative. He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Caldwell was uncomfortable. She didn't want to override Whitfield, but she wasn't going to refuse a board member, not during review season. She agreed. Miles Grant was added to the District Math Showcase roster. When Whitfield received the news, she was alone in room 212. She read the email, then she closed her laptop. Very slowly. The way someone closes a door, they'll never open again the same way. She didn't fight it. She didn't need to. She just made sure the hardest problem at the showcase, the tiebreaker, the final round, the one nobody was supposed to solve, was a problem she picked herself. So Miles has a spot, but Whitfield has the weapon. She picked the tiebreaker problem, the one designed to end him on the biggest stage of his life. The showcase is in 12 days. The clock is ticking. And the question nobody's asking, what exactly is on that tiebreaker? And does Whitfield even know her own answer is wrong? 12 days. That's all Miles had. 12 days to prepare for the biggest stage he'd ever stood on. 12 days to get ready for a tiebreaker he hadn't seen, written by a woman who wanted him to fail. The clock started now. Day 12. The library. Miles sat at his usual table, back corner, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. He pulled up the district archive on the library's ancient desktop computer. Every past showcase problem from the last 6 years. Printed them all. Stacked them in a pile next to his composition notebook. He started solving. Timed himself. First problem, 22 minutes. Second problem, 19. Third, 21. Too slow. Way too slow. Showcase rounds give you 10 minutes, sometimes less. He ripped the pages out. Started over. Faster this time. But faster wasn't enough. He needed to think differently. Day 10. The notebook. Something was changing in the way Miles worked. He wasn't just solving problems anymore. He was seeing through them. His composition notebook was filling up with something new. A shorthand system he invented himself. Symbols. Arrows. A personal language for derivative chains that let him skip the mechanical steps and go straight to the heart of the problem. Nina watched him solve a practice integral during lunch. Her jaw dropped. Hold on, you just skipped like 8 steps. Miles didn't look up. I didn't skip them. I did them in my head. In your head? All 8? They're not 8 separate steps. They're one pattern. Once you see the shape, you just follow it. Most students solve calculus problems like following a recipe. Step 1, step 2, step 3, all the way to step 12. Careful, methodical, safe. Miles didn't follow recipes. He saw shortcuts, patterns, connections that the textbook never taught because the textbook didn't know they existed. He'd recognize that a complicated integral was actually a disguised version of a simpler one, and he'd solve it in 3 steps, while everyone else was still on step 5. It wasn't magic. It was just seeing the shape of the math before anyone else could. Day 9. Simmons. Miles called the number on the business card. His cracked phone screen made it hard to read the digits. He had to hold it at an angle under the library light just to see the last 4 numbers. They met at a coffee shop on North Avenue. Simmons ordered black coffee. Miles ordered water. He couldn't afford coffee. Simmons didn't teach him math. That surprised Miles. He expected formulas, practice problems, drills. Instead, Simmons taught him something else entirely. Write bigger on the board. Audiences need to see from the back row. When you solve a step, pause for 1 beat. Let them catch up. Don't rush the setup. If they don't understand the problem, they can't appreciate the solution. And breathe, Miles. You forget to breathe when you're concentrating. Miles frowned. You're not going to teach me math? Simmons stirred his coffee, took a sip, set the cup down. The math you already have. What you need is to let people see it. Day 8. Whitfield strikes back. A notice appeared in every showcase participant's school mailbox. Mandatory review session, Thursday evening, 6 to 9 p.m. Attendance required, no exceptions. Thursday evening, the exact night Miles works his 4-hour shift at a grocery store on Ashland Avenue. Bagging groceries. $4 above minimum wage. Every dollar goes to Estelle for rent. Miles went to Whitfield, asked if he could attend a different session, or come early, or stay late another day. Whitfield barely looked at him. The schedule is the schedule, Miles. I can't rearrange the entire program for 1 student. She could have. She just didn't. Miles called his manager, lost the shift. Estelle picked up an extra ironing job that weekend to cover the missing income. She didn't complain. She never complained. But Miles saw her hands that night, red, raw, swollen from the steam iron. He said nothing. She said nothing. Some things don't need words to cut deep. At the review session, Whitfield ran rapid-fire drills. She cold-called Miles 6 times in 40 minutes. Every question was outside the AP curriculum, graduate-level material, things no high school student should be expected to answer on the spot. He got 5 right. He stumbled on the 6th, a partial differential equation he'd never seen before. He paused too long. The silence stretched. Whitfield tilted her head. "This is the level of the showcase, Miles. I hope you're prepared." She moved on, left him standing there with the silence still ringing. Day 5. Tommy Sullivan. After the review session, the hallway was empty. Miles was packing his bag. Slow. Heavy. Footsteps behind him. He turned around. Tommy Sullivan, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable, like a kid who wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. "Hey, that boundary condition thing in class the other day? I checked it after, on my own." Pause. "You were right." Another pause. "Good luck at the showcase." Then he walked away. No handshake, no fist bump, no dramatic moment. Just a kid who saw the truth and decided, quietly, to say so. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't allyship. It was just honesty. And for Miles, it was the first time anyone in that classroom treated his math like it was real. Day 3. Estelle's kitchen. 1 in the morning. Miles was at the kitchen table. Notebooks spread everywhere. Papers, pencils, a calculator with a dead battery. Estelle came out of her bedroom in her robe. She didn't say, "Go to sleep." She didn't say, "You have school tomorrow." She looked at the notebooks, looked at her grandson, and sat down across from him. She pulled out her crossword puzzle book, the one with the bent cover and the coffee stain on page 12. She opened it, started filling in the boxes. They sat together in silence. 2 people working on their own puzzles, keeping each other company in the dark. Sometimes love doesn't say anything. It just sits across the table and stays. Day 1, the night before. Miles reviewed his notebook. Every page, every proof, every shortcut, every pattern he'd discovered in the last 12 days. He closed it, set it on the kitchen table. He set his alarm for 6 a.m. Then he pulled out the ironing board, took his only button-down shirt, white, slightly yellow at the collar, and ironed it himself. Slow, careful, the way Estelle taught him. Collar first, then shoulders, then sleeves. Estelle was already asleep. She had a 5 a.m. shift. He could hear her breathing through the thin wall. He hung the shirt on the back of his chair, laid his notebook on top of his bag, and sat on the edge of his bed in the dark. He wasn't nervous about the math. He was nervous about everything around the math. The eyes, the whispers, the woman who'd already decided he didn't belong before he solved a single problem. 12 days of preparation, 12 days of grinding, mini wins, mini losses, rumors in the cafeteria, cold calls in the review session, a lost shift, a grandmother's swollen hands. All of it leading to tomorrow, the showcase. 200 people in that auditorium, parents, board members, university professors, a news crew, and somewhere in that room, Constance Whitfield. With a tiebreaker problem she handpicked, a problem she was absolutely certain Miles Grant could never solve. But there's something Whitfield didn't know, something Miles discovered the night before, something that changes everything. And that's where this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. The night before the showcase, Miles wasn't practicing problems. He was doing something else. He was going back through every answer key Whitfield had posted on the class website that semester. Every single one, problem by problem, line by line. He'd planned to use them as final review material, one last check before the big day. But what started as review turned into something else entirely. He found it in the October answer key first, a composite function problem, 3 nested layers. And right there, on the innermost function, the same mistake. The exact same sign error. Negative exponent treated as positive. Chain rule applied to the outer 2 layers, but skipped on the inside. His stomach dropped. He opened the November key. Different problem, same structure. Same error. 3rd line from the bottom. She did it again. January. Another one. A slightly different setup, but the same fundamental mistake buried in the same place. The innermost derivative. Ignored, skipped, like it didn't exist. 3 answer keys. 3 different months. The exact same error. In the exact same place. Miles sat back in his chair. The library was about to close. The lights were flickering. But he couldn't move. This wasn't a typo. This wasn't a careless mistake on one test. This was a pattern. A conceptual misunderstanding that Constance Whitfield had been carrying and teaching for God knows how long. She didn't just make an error on his qualifying test. She'd been making the same error all semester, maybe longer, maybe years. Every student graded against these keys, every score, every 58, every show your work. All of it, measured against an answer that was wrong. And then the real weight of it hit him. The tiebreaker problem. The one she handpicked for the showcase. The one she designed to stop him. If she wrote it, and she almost certainly did, there's a good chance it contains the same error, which means the correct answer the judges will be comparing against might be wrong. Again. Miles stared at his notebook. He had a choice. He could solve the tiebreaker Whitfield's way, match her key, take the safe score, walk away with a decent finish, and no controversy. Or he could solve it correctly, the right way, his way, and risk being marked wrong, again, in front of 200 people, on the biggest stage of his life. He thought about the face-down test, the red ink, the 58, show your work, the smile, at least he's brave. He thought about Estelle's hands, red and swollen from the steam iron. He closed the notebook. Miles Grant decided to solve it right, even if right looked wrong to every single person in that room. But solving it right means standing alone, on a stage, in front of cameras, against a teacher with 24 years of authority and an entire institution behind her. The showcase is tomorrow morning. His shirt is ironed, his notebook is packed, his alarm is set. But is he ready for what happens when the only person who knows the truth is the one nobody believes? Showcase morning, 6 a.m. Miles was already awake. He'd barely slept. He put on the white button-down, the one he ironed himself, slightly yellow at the collar, but it was pressed. It was clean. It was the best he had. 2 buses, 65 minutes. He arrived at 7:30. The auditorium was already filling. Judging panel up front. 2 university professors, a district administrator. Second row, center seat, Dr. Harold Simmons, leather notebook on his knee. A news crew setting up near the side entrance. Backstage, 5 participants waited. Tommy reviewed flashcards. Rebecca whispered formulas. Miles stood apart, notebook in his hands. Quiet. Whitfield appeared. A nod for Tommy. A pat for Rebecca. A thumbs up for Jason. She stopped at Miles. I hope you're ready for this, Miles. This isn't the classroom. Almost kind. Almost warm. Worse than cruelty. Because cruelty you can fight. False kindness just makes you feel crazy. Rounds 1 through 3, Miles was flawless. His shortcut method raised eyebrows. Unconventional, but every answer was correct. After 3 rounds, Miles and Tommy tied for first. Then the break came, and everything fell apart. Whitfield approached the head judge, quietly, off to the side. She expressed concern that one student might be using non-standard methods indicating memorized solutions rather than genuine understanding. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. The head judge told Principal Caldwell. Caldwell pulled Miles aside backstage. A concern has been raised about your methodology. I'd like you to show more conventional work in the remaining rounds, standard methods, textbook steps, just to be safe. Just to be safe. What she meant was, make your math look less like yours. Dumb it down. Stop being so good in a way we don't recognize. Miles walked out the side door, stood on the concrete steps. April air, cold. The anger came first, then the exhaustion. 18 days. Lost shifts. Estelle's swollen hands. Cold calls. Cafeteria whispers. A 58 that should have been 96. And now this. A formal concern about being too good. In the wrong way. In the wrong skin. He took out his phone, almost called Estelle, almost said he was coming home. You're not quitting. Nina, doorway behind him, arms crossed. They'll just mark me wrong again. It doesn't matter if I'm right. It matters to me. It matters to every kid who looks like us and gets told they don't belong in that room. He stared at the ground. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Estelle. No words, just a photo. His composition notebook. Open on the kitchen table. She found it after he left. She didn't understand a single equation, not one symbol, not one number. But she photographed every page, every single one. Underneath, one message. These hands solve things mine never could. Don't you dare close them into fists. Miles read it twice. He put his phone away, wiped his face, straightened his shirt. He looked at Nina. I'm going back in. He didn't go back because he thought he'd win. He went back because the math was right, and someone should say so. Even if that someone was a 16-year-old kid in a thrift store shirt with a grandmother's prayer in his pocket. The tiebreaker was next. The problem Whitfield chose herself, designed to break him. But Miles wasn't thinking about breaking anymore. He was thinking about that answer key, the error that 3 methods couldn't deny. And he was thinking, for the first time, about what would happen if he didn't just solve the problem. What if he showed the whole room the truth? The auditorium lights dimmed, then came back full. A signal. The tiebreaker is about to begin. 200 people settled into their chairs. Parents leaned forward. The news camera swiveled toward the stage. Dr. Simmons opened his leather notebook to a fresh page. After 4 rounds, we have a tie for first place. Tommy Sullivan and Miles Grant. The tiebreaker will determine our showcase champion. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Miles Grant? The quiet kid from the back corner? Whitfield walked to the podium. Her class. Her selection. She handed a single sheet to the tech assistant. The problem filled the wall behind the stage. 10 feet tall. A multi-step proof. Composite function. Optimization under constraints. A convergence argument woven through. 3 concepts fused into one monster. Graduate level difficulty. At a high school competition. The university judges glanced at each other. One tilted his head. The other raised an eyebrow. Both students will have 20 minutes. You may begin. Tommy started immediately. Head down, marker moving, standard textbook methodology, clean, orderly, step by step. His whiteboard filled with neat equations. Safe, solid. Miles didn't move. For nearly 2 minutes, he stood in front of his blank whiteboard, marker in hand, eyes on the problem. Not writing, just looking. The audience shifted. Whitfield watched from the side. A small smile. The same smile from the classroom. The one that said, "I knew it. He's frozen." Then Miles lifted the marker. He didn't start where Tommy started. He didn't start at the beginning at all. He started at the end. He wrote the conclusion first, then worked backward, building the logic in reverse, constructing a bridge from the destination to the starting point. Halfway through, he flipped it, connected the two halves, forward and backward meeting in the middle. Analysis, synthesis. You start from where you need to go, figure out what's required, then build the road from both directions. Elegant, sophisticated. Something most professors don't see until graduate seminars. The judges leaned in. One put down his coffee. The other started taking notes. Not grading notes, studying notes, like watching something he wanted to remember. Miles wrote in compact, efficient lines. Small handwriting, but crystal clear. No wasted steps. Every line followed from the one before with a logic that felt almost musical. He put down the marker, stepped back, 4 minutes remaining. Tommy finished with 30 seconds left, breathing hard. Miles was already done, standing still, hands at his sides. The judges reviewed both solutions. Tommy's was textbook perfect, correct, clean. Miles's was something else. Also correct, but the judges noted his approach was remarkably sophisticated for a high school student. One judge circled a specific step and nodded slowly, like he'd seen something rare. The rubric measured correctness, efficiency, and elegance. Both scored full marks on correctness. On efficiency and elegance, Miles pulled ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, our showcase champion, Miles Grant. Applause. Tommy shook his hand. The audience clapped. But something was unresolved. Everyone felt it. The clapping faded. Because Miles didn't leave the stage. He turned to the judging panel. Voice steady, quiet. The same voice from the classroom. If I may, I'd like to address one more thing. The auditorium went silent. Miles pulled out his cracked phone, handed it to the tech assistant. Seconds later, an image filled the screen behind him. His qualifying test. 58 out of 100. Red ink everywhere. Show your work next time. 200 people stared at that image. Miles pointed to problem 4, the composite function. This is my solution. I was marked wrong. He pulled up the second image, Whitfield's answer key. This is the answer key I was graded against. I'd like to walk through both. Calmly, clearly, like a surgeon showing an X-ray. He pointed to the exact line where the two solutions diverged, the innermost function. His solution differentiated it. The answer key didn't. The chain rule requires you to differentiate every layer, outside, middle, and the innermost function. The answer key stopped at the middle layer. The innermost function was never differentiated. He paused. Let the silence hold. If you look at line 4 of the answer key, the posted official answer key, the inner function was never differentiated. The chain rule requires it. Without it, the entire solution collapses. That's not my opinion. That's calculus. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Whitfield sat in the third row, face drained of color, hands clasped, motionless. Dr. Simmons rose from the second row, slowly, deliberately. Every eye shifted to him. For the record, I've checked Mr. Grant's work independently. His solution is correct. The answer key distributed to this class contained a material error. I want to be very clear about that. One person in the back started clapping, then another, then the row behind, then the next, then the entire auditorium. Miles stood on that stage, under the lights, in his thrift store shirt with the yellow collar, and for the first time in this entire story, he smiled. But the applause hadn't finished when something unexpected happened. A woman stood up in the middle section, a black parent. She wasn't clapping. She was crying. My daughter, Aaliyah, she dropped AP Calculus last year because Mrs. Whitfield told her she wasn't ready. She transferred schools. She got the highest math score in her new class. The applause stopped. A different silence took over. Not shock, recognition. Another parent stood, right side. My son too, in 2022. Then another, then another. Miles didn't just open a door, he ripped down the entire wall. And standing in the rubble, Constance Whitfield, motionless, hands clasped, surrounded by 200 people finally seeing what Miles had seen all along. But this isn't over. What Dr. Simmons has been quietly building behind the scenes is about to turn a classroom scandal into something the entire district will never forget. The auditorium emptied slowly, but a side conference room filled fast. Dr. Simmons, 2 university judges, Principal Caldwell, a parent representative, and Constance Whitfield, seated at the head of the table, fingers gripping the chair so hard her knuckles turned white. Simmons opened his laptop. No small talk. 5 answer keys. 3 years of AP Calculus. Side by side. In each one, highlighted in yellow, the exact same error. Innermost function, chain rule, sign flip. 5 problems, 5 times, same mistake, same place. This is not a typo. This is a conceptual error embedded in this curriculum for at least 3 years. Every student graded against these keys may have received an incorrect score, not just Miles Grant. One university judge removed his glasses. This is no longer about one test. This is a curriculum-level problem. Whitfield didn't speak, didn't move. The dominoes fell fast. That evening, the Parent Association sent a formal email demanding a full grade review going back 3 years. 34 signatures in 2 hours. That evening, 2 former students posted on social media. One in college, one graduated, both black. Both said Whitfield gave them low scores. Both told AP Math wasn't the right fit. Both transferred out. That evening, the showcase judges sent an official letter to the school board recommending immediate suspension of Whitfield's AP certification. Caldwell had nowhere left to hide. She made 3 announcements. Whitfield's AP teaching privileges suspended immediately. All qualifying scores regraded by an independent third party. Miles Grant's test score changed from 58 to 96. Time-stamped. Permanent. Whitfield signed the corrected grade sheet. Didn't speak. When she set the pen down, her hand was trembling. Now go back. Rewatch from the beginning. Every scene with Simmons. The classroom visit. The notebook. The business card. The phone call. None of it was coincidence. He saw this before Miles stepped on that stage. He just needed someone talented enough and brave enough to prove it in public. Miles was that someone. Justice isn't a single moment. It's someone making sure that moment can never be erased. And Simmons wasn't done, because what happened the next morning, in front of the entire school, is the part Whitfield will remember for the rest of her life. Next morning, special assembly, the entire school in the auditorium, students, teachers, parents lining the back wall. Principal Caldwell read a formal statement. The school acknowledged that AP Calculus answer keys contained serious conceptual errors over 3 years. All affected grades would be reviewed and corrected. Then she turned to Whitfield. Whitfield stood, walked to the podium, the same podium she'd stood behind for 24 years. But today, the other side, the side where you answer instead of teach. The silence was familiar. Same silence as when she skipped Miles during cold calls. Same silence as when she dropped his test face down. Same silence as, at least he's brave. But this time, it was pointed at her. Voice-controlled, dry as paper. I made errors in my instruction that I should have caught sooner. And I did not listen when a student pointed them out. That is my responsibility. She didn't say his name, didn't say sorry, but everyone heard what she didn't say, louder than any confession. She stepped down. Nobody clapped. 24 years, 2 awards, a Northwestern degree. All collapsed, not because a student was smarter, because she refused to believe that was possible. Whitfield lost AP privileges, permanently. Reassigned to freshman algebra. Room 212, no longer hers. Her Teacher of the Year plaques removed from the trophy case. The nails stayed in the wall. 12 students had grades corrected. 9 were Black or Latino. Nobody commented on that number. It spoke for itself. Outside, Estelle was waiting. She knew. Nina called last night. She took his hands, looked at them. The hands from the text message. Your grandfather went his whole life and nobody listened. You made this whole city listen. She held him. And Miles, for the first time in this entire story, cried. Not sadness. He was finally seen. If you've ever been right and told you were wrong, leave your story in the comments. I read every one. Share this with someone who needs it today. And subscribe. More stories like this are coming.
Do you know what I learned from Miles? The truth doesn't need a title. It doesn't need a degree on the wall. It doesn't need 24 years of experience. 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't matter who says it. It doesn't matter what they are wearing when they say it. It's still 4. And that's the thing about people who hold power over you. They don't just want to be right. They need you to believe you are wrong. That's how it works. They rate you low enough times, skip your name enough times, sit you in the back corner enough times, and eventually you stop raising the hand. You stop trusting yourself. You start thinking maybe you are right. Maybe you don't belong. But Miles didn't stop. And I think that's the lesson. You don't need everyone in the room to believe you. You just need to believe yourself long enough for the truth to catch up. And it's always there. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it catches up. And can I be honest? The part that hit me hardest was Estella. She couldn't read a single equation in the notebook, but she photographed every page, every one, because love doesn't need to understand what you're building. It just needs to show up and stay. Have you ever been told you were wrong when you knew you were right? Tell me in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice, every week. And remember, the truth doesn't need permission. It just needs time.